everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, and you just heard our new theme song. And that's not the only thing that's new. There is so much going on with The Wedding Biz, and you can hear a lot about it in last week's episode. If you missed it, it was the anniversary show in which we celebrated and honored the 1-year anniversary of the launch of the show. I talk about why I started it, what motivates me. You get to meet my team, Melissa Fancy and also Christy Hausler. Very exciting. Trust me, you will be very impressed with them. And there are messages from several of our past guests, all of whom are considered to be icons in the industry. It was such a fun time, and also, I hope, educational, inspirational, and just overall a wonderful time. So please catch it if you haven't heard it already. So today's guest is Harmony Walton. The Bridal Bar is the core of her various platforms, and it is just the tip of the iceberg. Oh my gosh, my conversation with Harmony was electric. There is so much for you to get out of this show. There was so much that I got out of my conversation with Harmony. And just some of the things that stuck out to me right off the bat was, first of all, she talks about her first job while she was in college working for a major Hollywood celebrity, and talks about what she did for this particular person and this person's family and how it influenced her even to this day. She talks about how at the age of 22 or 23, she started a business to continue pretty much the aspect of what she did for this celebrity. It's very interesting. And she also talks about nurturing and maintaining relationships to stay on top of mind. So many tips related to that. It's wonderful hearing her stories. And also talks about how she survived and even thrived during the recession following 2008 and 2009. Really fascinating. Harmony also gives her take on social media. I think you're going to find some surprises there. And another topic, I mean, there's so many, but another one that stuck out to me is how she talks about how she operates on a minimal marketing budget, something every one of us can absolutely learn from. I, in particular, wanted to hear that one. And during that, she does talk about how, about Style Me Pretty announcing that they were closing because at the time of the interview, it had just been announced. And of course, since the recording of my conversation with Harmony, the original founders announced that they are going to save it, though they haven't yet announced or perhaps even worked out what it's going to look like moving forward. Very, very interesting conversation. And lastly, I want to urge everybody to listen to the follow-up episode, which is called The Next Level, in which my co-host, Melissa Fancy, and I discuss some of the main points of the interview. We help to break it down and translate into specific tactics that you can use to improve your business. So be sure to check out The Next Level following this one. And so enjoy my conversation with Harmony Walton. Harmony, you are the founder of the Bridal Bar and a luxury destination weddings and honeymoons blog site, Fete, and host of the Bridal Bar Radio, powered by Clear Channel and airing weekly and on demand on iHeart Radio. Since its inception, the Bridal Bar has been featured in over 100 media outlets, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, Entertainment Tonight, People Magazine, Martha Stewart Weddings, US Weekly, and many, many more. You also have over a decade in marketing, consulting, and brand representation experience in the luxury wedding industry. Some of your celebrity clientele include Tom Cruise and Kitty Holmes, Kendra Wilkinson and Hank Baskett, and Katherine Heigl and Josh Kelly. And as a wedding business consultant and wedding expert, you speak frequently worldwide to both consumers and companies. I don't know how you are balancing all of this.
That's a mouthful.
It is. You sound really. What do you think when I read this out to you? The accomplishments and all that you're doing.
Oh, I think it sounds a little bit jack of all trades, master of none, but that is not what it is. It may sound like that on paper, but no, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I get not necessarily bored easily, but I get creative often. And for me, that looks like a lot of different things. And so when I started my business in 2004, the Bridal Bar, it started as one thing. And then with every idea that I thought was great that I had, I did an offshoot of XYZ. And that's what kind of grew into this little stable of a variety of different platforms, but then they all do reflect and relate back to Bridal Bar, which is the core.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I also know I've heard you talk a lot about reinventing yourselves and how a lot of this, how you evolved, has been a part of that philosophy. But I'm curious, kind of in terms of how you grew up and how childhood and influences back then affected you now. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in San Diego, came to LA where I've been for 20 years now, came to LA to go to UCLA. And, you know, I actually, interesting, my family, as far back as we can track, has had one female born in every generation. Oh. So until actually now the little kids generation, there's lots of girls in this next generation after me. But previous to that, so I was the only girl in my generation, grew up as a tomboy with a lot of guys. I got tough quick from doing that, played a lot of sports. I come from a sports family background and came to UCLA and wanted to kind of find my own way. And I got a job working for Dustin Hoffman in college.
Can I stop for a minute?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you?
Please.
I'm just curious, in terms of the sports family background that you have, did you feel a pressure? I mean, number one, you're the only girl, like you said, in the generation. Number two, you're growing up in this type of a family, you know, in terms of the success and the attention. I mean, was there some sort of needing to prove yourself in a way?
Oh, definitely. And I think that leads to where I was going with that, what kind of started my career in college, but was that I wanted to find something that was completely different from anybody in my family, because so many, my dad was a professional athlete. All of my cousins, my brother, they were all college or professional athletes. I've got other relatives that had been professional athletes, and they had so much success in an arena that I wasn't going to have success in.
And also to the public. I mean, it's not just private. It's like everyone knows.
That's true. And being a female, there wasn't as much opportunity, but clearly I wasn't going to be as good as them. And so... And coming from a very competitive family, I grew up very competitively, especially with the boys. And I really couldn't compete. And that pissed me off.
But how did, in terms of like, did you literally do sports? Like, how did it manifest?
Oh, yeah. I was a basketball player. And I wasn't as good as I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to make the WNBA. When it was my turn, the WNBA was, I don't even know if it was around, to be honest, back then. I wasn't good enough to play in it, had it been, though. And that really frustrated me because my brother, my cousins, everyone else was good enough. And so I wanted to be sort of good enough in my own head, and I couldn't compete with them. So I decided to turn left and find something that was completely all my own, something frankly very girly that none of the men in my family wanted to touch, knew anything about, you know, getting married, weddings, flowers, invitations, none of that interested them whatsoever. And so it really interested me because I could sort of forge my own path and really have my own identity and have my own success that wasn't piggybacked to theirs and wasn't trying to be competitive with theirs.
Yeah, but what was it about weddings in the first of all, how old were you when you realized that, you know, you want to be in that industry?
Well, I started my business, the Bridal Bar, when I was 24. Back in college, a few years prior to that, I did take an extension class at, I think it was Santa Monica City College through UCLA. It was like a weekend course, how to be a wedding planner. And I was that kid in college that was thinking, what business am I going to start as soon as I graduate?
Right. But so you knew that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, like you're saying, you just didn't know what field it would be in.
I didn't, but I knew I was the kid that had Martha Stewart wedding magazines at 16.
Okay.
And so I liked the industry. I didn't know if that was exactly what I was going to do. I had done a lot of personal shopping in college for Dustin Hoffman and his family. And so I really kind of liked the Hollywood industry and the gifting world. And I was trying to figure out what that was going to look like in my career. And so I took this extension class, how to be a wedding planner, and I hated it.
Oh, you did?
I hated it. I remember they gave us a sample budget to run for a fake couple, and it was a $14,000 wedding budget.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, well, that sounds awful. I don't want to plan a $14,000 wedding over and over and over again every year. And it was a lot more logistics and numbers than I had in my head. In my head, it was Martha Stewart. It was pretty cakes and flowers, and it had nothing to do with this behind the scenes boring budgets and things like that. So I decided that wasn't right for me. And I was really trying to hone in what was right for me. I knew I was a terrible graphic designer. I didn't have the hands-on creativity to be a florist or a musician or anything like that, but I knew I was creative. And I knew I enjoyed the industry when I was working for the Hoffmans. I helped plan a lot of parties. I worked with their party planners, a lot of birthday parties and anniversaries and things like that.
Did you enjoy that aspect of it?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. But I saw where my weaknesses were. And I saw that, even if it was one of their kids' birthday parties, not a high pressure situation, I was stressed out on the day of, or where's the cake? And what time's the florist coming in? Or when are we going to get all this stuff done? And so I saw right there that I shouldn't be at a wedding, that I'm actually not good under time constraints and high pressure when you've got till 6 o'clock to get something done.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of, I think, real life experience in college, which was so wonderful for me to help figure out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And that ultimately several years later led me to kind of inventing a business or inventing a job description that fit my strengths and kind of steered away from my weaknesses.
So was this soon after your experience working with Dustin Hoffman?
So I worked.
What did you do after, if not?
So I worked for the Hoffmans for 3 years in college. It was the most rewarding, wonderful experience. I mean, had I not gone to UCLA, I would not have had that opportunity. Had I not had that opportunity, I never would have had the Bridal Bar. It was, I owe so much of it to that experience and what I learned.
What were some of the biggest things that you learned?
I learned the other side of the high-end luxury market. So I had been fortunate enough to grow up in a family that allowed me to be on the receiving end of a lot of that, but I had never seen the service side of that. And so I got to see the other side of that coin and what goes into creating these experiences and these parties for the luxury market or the top 1%. And that was invaluable. The amount of dedication and time and attention to detail that goes into it. I had no idea that, things like colors of toothbrushes mattered, but they did. And that was an invaluable lesson for me. And I would also say I learned a lot about it's who you know. Dustin Hoffman had been in the movie business for most of his life since he was 18 years old, and he was in his 60s when I worked for him.
Wow.
And so much of what I did as a low-level college-age employee was help sustain those relationships. Because imagine how many people he has worked with or met in his lifetime.
Oh, this is an interesting point.
And so, if he had done Tootsie 30 years prior with a famous director or producer or, counterpart, an actor, keeping those relationships alive when you've all got very big lives and you've worked with now thousands of great people over the span of your career. And so a lot of what my role was keeping those relationships kind of nurtured in terms of sending anniversary gifts, birthday presents, keeping up on thank you notes, doing holiday Christmas shopping and Hanukkah shopping, and attending events on their, on that, whoever the guest of honor's behalf was, making sure that all of those pieces were in place so that the Hoffman family, and Dustin specifically, looked very engaged with all of those people that he'd worked with for so long so that he could get his next job, because you never know as an actor where that next job is going to come from. And with him, it was very authentic. It was certainly not the smoke and mirrors situation where he was just trying to keep up with the Joneses or climb the social ladder. He had long been at the top of the social ladder, and he just had a big life, and it was maintaining all of those relationships and friendships that he had.
This is making me think, because I know you were at Engaged last time too, and Brian Raffinelli talked about creating legacy clients. And even though I'm aware of that, it really opened my eyes to having a bigger focus on that. And that, in a sense, is what we're talking about too with Dustin Hoffman, that part of your job was doing that.
It's, for someone of his generation and in the Hollywood world, I think it's a little different. It's almost like a human drip campaign, right? So now we do e-blasts and have all these different digital marketing touch points to remain top of mind. And Dustin had the financial ability and the team in place to make that much more high level and much more personal. If it was I remember it was Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise had an anniversary. This is dating myself now. And it was, he had been very close to Tom Cruise, and it was, let's honor their marriage, and what can we send them as an anniversary present that is really unique, special, and personal to them. And it wasn't a marketing ploy. It was certainly authentic and came from a great warm place in his heart, but it was also very valuable to people remembering him and people wanting to work with him the next time.
How do you stand out to someone who's already getting everything?
Exactly. And how do you, there are only so many roles for that type of character, and how do you remain the guy that everybody wants to work with? And I think I learned, that's probably the most important thing I learned, is how do you become the person everybody wants to work with, but then how do you remain that person?
That's almost harder, isn't it? In a sense,
absolutely.
To keep it up.
It's one thing to climb to the top, and it's a lot harder to stay there.
Well, I'm going to skip around a little bit here, but how do you suggest doing that? What would you recommend, generally speaking, in the wedding industry on how to do that, how to maintain those relationships?
I was going to say, how to get to the top is different for everyone, but I think how do you maintain those relationships is not easy, because we may not be movie stars, but we're all very busy people. For me, a lot of it is I am a constant emailer. And so even if it's a 1 or 2 sentence email, I always have time to send it or respond to an email. I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I think going to things like Engage is incredibly valuable, because it's that, I kind of refer to it as summer camp, where you get to see your old friends every summer.
Yeah, it's very bonding.
It is. And it's that opportunity to connect with someone again that maybe you met last time, and this time you're having a little bit more time to chat and catch up, and it's really forging those personal relationships. I'm fortunate enough to get to travel with a lot of the people in the wedding industry, and so a lot of my business relationships have become some of my closest personal relationships. And that stems a lot of opportunity, just because it's fun, because I had a conversation on the way over here with Jennifer Stein of Destination I Do magazine, who's become a dear friend of mine. And we're spitballing ideas around because we want to work together, because we have fun working together, and we trust each other. And so a lot of it is, I think, a little bit organic, and almost you can't plan it. It has to be very true to your personality and who you are. And it is a little more difficult, I think, if you're an introvert, but that's what's great about email. Nobody wants to talk on the phone anymore anyways. So
it's so funny. I barely leave voicemails for anyone, because I find people get angry. Isn't that funny?
And that to me is great, because I'm not a big phone talker, but I think that lean on whatever that strength is, and don't forget to do that. I started out, when I started, there was no such thing as a wedding blog. And so the number one way my business got recognized fast and wide was through traditional media, was editorial in bridal magazines, Hollywood rags, TV shows. And every year at Christmas time, I would send these beautiful, they were floral boxes with moss and fake butterflies and fresh flowers, and a bottle of Dom Perignon inside. And I would send those every holiday to the editors that had been good to me that year. And I was shocked at how many people were shocked to get that from me.
Yeah, that is surprising.
And these are people that, are editors at People Magazine and producers of E!
You would think they're getting inundated with this kind of stuff.
You would think. And maybe I hadn't talked to them for a few months, and so it was an out of the blue connection, but it was a very authentic and true thank you. I really was grateful for all they really did put me on the map and gave me an opportunity to grow my business. And so I wanted to say thank you, but so few people actually say thank you that I would get these responses that were kind of blown away. And then it was this almost instant friendship that maybe we didn't have before, because, oh, wow, that's so thoughtful and nice. And I was surprised how few people say thank you. So I think that's another way, even if it's just a handwritten note.
I'm also just thinking it's such a deep-rooted need I think we all have. It's not necessarily ego to be recognized. In terms of what you're saying, it's that someone really appreciates in a sincere way. And so I agree. I like that. I really try to go out of my way to tell people periodically. And again, I'm not making it up. If I feel grateful, instead of thinking it to myself, why not just tell them, I'm so grateful to have you in my life? I'll do that with business people too, because I am.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it doesn't have to be a bottle of Dom. Full disclosure, I don't do that anymore. But a handwritten thank you note. I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago that I spoke at, Oh So Inspired. And literally 48 hours after I got home, I had a small gift in the mail and a thank you note from one of the attendees.
Wow.
And I will never forget her because it came so quickly. She went home and wanted me to know right away that I made an impact on her at the conference.
That's wonderful. And
it was so sweet. And now I have this special place in my heart for her. But it was also done not like, okay, next month I got to get around to sending things. It was clearly.
Yeah, it was from the heart.
Yes. And it was something top of mind to her, and she made it happen.
So coming back to your trajectory of your career. So after you're with Dustin Hoffman and a few years later, you got this idea. If you could tell me how the inspiration, the idea got sparked. So
not a lot of people know this. Some people do. But actually, so I graduated college, got a job in Hollywood PR. I could have stayed on with the Hoffmans, but I wanted to do something in Hollywood a little bit different. And so I decided to get into PR. So I worked for a public relations firm that represented other actors, Drew Barrymore, Angelica Houston, Patrick Dempsey, and some producers and movies and such. And I did that for 9 months. And then 9/11 happened. And my boss was at the Toronto Film Festival, and I was back in the office. And she called me, and she was staying at the Four Seasons with one of our big name actors. And she called me and said, get me home. This is the 2 seasons. I can't have one more day of runny eggs if my life depends on it. Yeah. And I'm the only person in the office because 9/11 has just happened and the world has stopped. And she's saying, get me on a plane. I don't like the breakfast here at the Four Seasons in Canada. And no one is obviously flying. And I spent the next 3 days trying to get her home faster than every other human being on the planet. Obviously, I failed. And she had to take a regular commercial flight when they started flying again, like everyone else. And I just had this, I can't go back there ever again moment. And I said, I can't do celebrity PR because the fact that this is what matters on this day is making my skin crawl. And so shortly thereafter, I quit that job. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I just didn't want to do that. And it became toxic for me very quickly. And it wasn't a bad company. It was just not who I was. Yeah. And so I toyed with a business that I had wanted to start in college. In college, I'd actually made business cards for myself at Kinko's and never did anything with them. Just thought like, oh, once you have business cards, what did it say on the business card? It said Harmony Walton Presents. And it was a play on words like presents, like gifts, and also presents like showman, like an event of some sort. And I thought, well, I'll do parties and gifting, sort of like what I did for the Hoffmans. And so this was back in the era of those enormous Oscar swag bags that were worth $50,000 when the presenters would, or a nominee would get when they went to the show before the IRS cracked down on all of those. Oh, right. I read about that. Yeah. And so I ended up starting a business called Les Cadeaux, which means the gifts in French. And I did it. So at that point, I think I was 22 or 23. And I just thought, I'm not finding a job that I am really inspired by, that pays me any money. I'm just out of college kid. And so I was like, I'm going to start my own thing. And I found I had a friend that had a store on Robertson in Beverly Hills, which at the time was the place, where the Kardashians were sort of coming up and the Kitson era. And the store next to her was going under, but she was under a lease. And she had, less than a year left on her lease. And I had no money. I mean, I was basically a college kid. And so I couldn't have gotten into a commercial space or retail space any other way. And I said, well, let me take over the last, I think it was like maybe 9 months of your lease. I didn't even have to put a deposit down because she already had put a deposit down. The store was already done. So basically she moved out, I moved in. And the concept was basically to do what I did for the Hoffmans, but to do it out of house and for a variety of different artists and people in the entertainment business. So the Hoffmans didn't have to pay someone on or a salary necessarily to do it. They could pay us per event or per calendar. And we would do swag bags and gifting. And it wasn't event planning. I decided at that point I had taken this extension class and decided that wasn't for me. So it was specifically surrounded on annual gifts, corporate gifts, holiday gifts, and swag bags for the Hollywood industry. So I started that. And that actually took off pretty well. We ended up, because of kind of some of the Hollywood relationships that I had and that little bit of PR experience I had, I was able to get some of our products in the hands of some big name celebrities and then pitch those products to people like Us Weekly and People Magazine, who would then write about the product. So-and-so is wearing this tank top or, this bracelet that they got at this store. Here's where you can buy it. And so that would come out. And for the next 3 days, we would just see order come
Harmony.
in.
Geez, that's great.
And I hated it.
Oh, you did though?
I totally hated it. And I was frankly not very good at it. But I was good at marketing it. I wasn't good at the retail world. And I'd never even worked in a retail environment like in high school or anything. I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't like that it was a hamster wheel. You sell $30,000 worth of bracelets. You have to buy $30,000 more to keep restocking and restocking. And I felt like I could never get off the hamster wheel. So cut to, I was on that same block was Claire Pettibone, the bridal designer. Her store was also there. And we had become friends and neighbors. And she said, I'm doing a runway show and a launch party for her latest collection at a studio backlot. And this bridal magazine is sponsoring it. And I want to do swag bags for all the attendees. Can you curate a swag bag like we had done for different award shows and things like that? And I said, sure. And so at that event, the founders of Inside Weddings were there, and Inside Weddings magazine at the time was just transitioning from a regional newspaper. It was actually like newspaper print, but with a color cover to it. They were transitioning from that to a traditional format magazine and going national. And they were the media sponsor, and they loved what I did for the party. And they said, hey, we've got this column that features all product and kind of new trendy things. Do you want to curate this column for us? And I said, sure. And they said, great, you'll be a writer for us. And I said, well, I'd really have to be a contributing editor. And I didn't frankly really know what that even meant. But I think that the youth and that kind of no fear and almost that millennial entitlement helped me a little.
That's interesting. Okay.
And they said, oh, yeah, we wouldn't have it any other way.
Awesome.
And I thought, okay, time to Google what that even means. And they were awesome. So Art and Walt at Inside Weddings really through Claire Pettibone and that event really gave me my platform to start the Bridal Bar and to really break into the wedding industry. And so I was writing for them, and in exchange, I wanted to promote my business. And they were just starting their magazine. Obviously, they didn't have a huge budget either. So we swapped the content that I would create for them. I got advertising trade for my business in the magazine. And it was a win-win, and it was great. And then the more I got into the wedding business and I got to meet people through them and photo shoots for the magazine and all of that. And I really fell in love with the people in our industry. And I thought, this is what I want to be doing, not the retail rat race.
Sure.
So I ended up coming up with an idea for Inside Weddings, which essentially was the Bridal Bar. And they didn't love the idea.
I was going to say, they turned it down, right?
They did. They didn't love the idea for their business. And I said, okay, great, no problem. And I just couldn't let the idea go over time. It was just still percolating. And so I ultimately started it on my own without using their brand name. And I thought using their brand name would obviously catapult it and could have been a win-win. I'm glad in hindsight.
Yeah, how ironic, right?
Yeah, and in hindsight, I'm glad that I didn't hitch my wagon to a magazine because it allowed me to work with all magazines, including theirs.
Yes.
So I started the Bridal Bar, sold off the product that I had and the website for the gifting business. And at first I created the Bridal Bar as like an annex to the gifting business because that had a name within Los Angeles. And I literally put up a wall in that store and made it kind of two. And very quickly, Bridal Bar started to take off and I liked it so much more. And so I got rid of the other business and ran with Bridal Bar from there.
I found a quote that, and I'd love to stay with this for a moment because this is really important. You know, when they turned you down, you said, and I wish I could give the credit, I don't remember where I saw it, but you said when something seemingly bad happens, in some way it's for the greater good in the long run. So just have faith. Don't give up. Be open to change and pivoting and go where you are meant to be in the market.
I said that.
You did?
All right. That was a good day, I guess.
That was really well said. But that is the core to me of what so many of us need to keep, you know, to when something, I always feel that there's no such thing as a failure, right? And like at first, when you got turned down, I'm assuming maybe...
Oh, I was devastated.
Yeah, at first, right?
Right.
But then when you take a breath for a minute, and I like to do this now, I like to think, okay, hold on. Not that it's some a God or something that's destiny, not like that. But let me just think in terms of the universe and manifesting. Is there maybe a reason in that sense that this didn't happen? What is on the other side of the door for me? And I just assume it's better. I mean, I don't know if it's some kind of a healthy denial, but it helps me
optimism.
to open my mind more. Yeah. And then fine. So, I mean, can you say something more about that? I mean, you experienced it and you were inspired to say what you just said. You know, being open to pivoting, don't give up and be open.
Well, I think our mutual friend, Sean Lowe, has kind of drilled that theory into my head over the years, which is, you know, you can't lie down on the train tracks. If you do, you're going to get run over. You have to change.
Yeah.
And I remember at the point that I felt I was at the top of my business trajectory, and he said, time to change. And I said, why on earth would I do? Why would I fix something that's not broken? And I learned the next year that hard lesson that if you don't change and not necessarily pivot, but oftentimes pivot, you get run over, because what works this year, especially now in our digital era with social media, what works this year is not going to work next year.
Well, and therefore, even if things are working, how do we keep evolving? How do we stay ahead? Right?
Exactly. And to your earlier point about kind of not being disappointed by those failures, I mean, I looked back, so that was probably in 2000. So that must have been 2004 when Art and Walt at Inside Weddings decided that it wasn't right for their business. And I loved them and I still do to this day. But I was disappointed. Well, then not that many years later, the print bubble burst. And I remember, and they wrote it out and they're still doing fantastic all these years later. But at the moment that hit, I remember thinking, thank God I am not in the print business. And that was, maybe 5 years after that. But I was like, wow, I dodged a bullet on that one.
That's great. So for those who might not be fully aware of it, can you just kind of summarize what the Bridal Bar is all about?
So the Bridal Bar, our mission statement is that we educate and inspire couples in order to influence their vendor decisions. So at its core, it is two separate sort of divisions, but one doesn't work without the other.
Yeah.
Our part one is that we are a virtual concierge service to help couples find the right companies for their wedding. So couples getting engaged, they need a band, they need a photographer. We will help curate a team that is appropriate for their style, price, all of the different factors that go into their unique wedding. How we do that is by education and inspiration. We build that level of trust. We teach them a little bit how to properly spend, where not to overspend, what to look out for, what they need to know, what they need to buy, because it's for most people a new process. Yeah. And then we do that in order to put our wedding professional teams in place. And our wedding professional teams are the ones who pay us. So we're totally complimentary to the public. Those companies, those photographers, locations, wedding planners, they pay us a retainer fee to be represented by the Bridal Bar. And with that, we do a number of different things for them. And it's actually very different for each company. But essentially, we're a marketing agency for them. So we will push them in front of those couples, but not until we've designed a media kit that is appropriate for them. Perhaps use that media kit to help get them some press.
Wait, you design it for them or with them? You're guiding them.
We guide them. So, and I actually don't have in-house graphics, but I will physically go in and mock something up,
service.
and then either our graphic designer that we work with or theirs will actually put it together. We'll take our visual mock-ups and our written copy that we have gone deep and rolled up our sleeves with the client to create. So what ended up happening was, and this goes to that kind of pivot conversation. So back in the early days, Bridal Bar was that storefront concept.
Yes.
It was the first of its kind. We had huge success right out of the gate, and we had everybody in town copying us, not only in concept, but also in name. And I mean, I would send out dozens of trademark infringement legal letters, every quarter. It was that bad. And couples would come into the showroom or the retail environment, although we didn't sell anything, and touch invitation papers and linens and see cake samples and look through portfolios of photographers and watch videos of bands and have a very interactive concierge-like experience. And they would sit down with one of our experts and guide them through that process. And so we're not wedding planners. We don't go on the wedding day. Again,
sure.
It goes back to what I'm not good at.
Right.
And that's something.
Right.
So I like to say we assist, we don't plan. So that was the initial concept. And then all of our companies that we represented were in that environment visually. What I learned quickly was that so many creative businesses are so creative and so artistically talented in what they do that they don't have the business side of their brain intact. And so, most people are good at one and not the other.
Yeah.
And so the most talented florist in town was just a train wreck with everything but the flowers. And so we realized we were struggling to help those companies help themselves. We can't say to this couple, hire this florist, they're going to be late to your wedding, or hire this florist, trust us, they're the best you've ever worked with, but their website's really ugly, but just trust us,
Right,
they're going to be great.
Yeah.
And so we ended up growing our consulting side of the business out of necessity in that we had to help them help themselves on the back end first in order to present them properly to the couple.
Yeah.
And then when the market crashed back in 2009, we had a lot of our clients coming to us and saying things like, well, we're having to discount our services to the couples, so you have to discount your service to us. And frankly, I couldn't afford to. I had a retail storefront in Beverly Hills. That wasn't feasible. And so I said, no, we're not going to discount our service. I also knew that it's a slippery slope to try and get it built back up. For the past year, you've had a discount, but now that discount's
people
gone.
Get used to it.
Right. And so I went back to all of our wedding companies and I said, no, we're not going to discount our services, but all of these extra services that we've been giving you for free, we're going to make a little more formal. So things like we had a lot of press opportunities because that was a world that I knew. So I would farm out, hey, Bridal Bar members, XYZ magazine is working on this. Here's an opportunity for you to be included. Now we're getting our clients more press. That gives us more tools to sell them to the couples. Well, we were doing that on just a very casual group basis.
Yeah.
And instead I said, we're going to hone in on this because this is actually helping them equally, if not more so, than actually talking to any couple we send them. And so we expanded that marketing program to say, we're not going to discount our service, but we're going to provide more value. And it's going to look like this. And here's what we're going to give you. And all of these different values that we'd sort of been doing organically and naturally through the process, we made very formal.
Well, and name it for them, right? So they're aware.
Absolutely.
So they're aware
and dive deeper. So we weren't just scratching the surface. Now you're actually paying us for these services. So it's not just a freebie we're throwing at you once in a while. We're going to dive deeper into the experience and do things like recreate your sales deck because that's actually now part of the service that you're paying for. And that was a pivot that was a necessity that I wouldn't have done had the market not crashed. And ultimately, that's the direction and the trajectory that the Bridal Bar has since taken since 2009. And while we still work with couples, the the core of it is much more that business development and back end base, and the couples have become more of the bonus versus the other way around.
I'm curious. I mean, this is such a brilliant idea. At the time, though, when the market kind of crashed like that, did you feel fear in the moment? I mean, did you go through what so many people experienced? I mean, it sounds wonderful what you did, but did you have that moment where, what am I going to do? I'm scared.
I didn't. I really didn't. And I think part of that was because, at least in the LA market that I was very much infiltrated in, it happened a little later. The market crashed, but those weddings were already contracted.
Yeah. But then new ones starting to dry up.
And then so the following year, it hit us a little bit later. And so I think that because when everyone was talking about it, I didn't feel that impact. That by the time it did impact us, it was a little bit slower and maybe not as obvious. And again, I had that youthful naivete where I was like, right. Okay, well, we're not on Wall Street, so we're going to be fine. Yeah. And I think a lot of that lack of business school, lack of business experience really ultimately, whereas I would love to have so many of those tools now, a lot of that served me early on because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I didn't have that fear of what was to come because it didn't occur to me.
Yeah. I also want to ask, there was a story about you in Driven for Women, March of 2016. So about 2 years ago. Yeah, I found that. And the author said, I believe that in this day and age, a successful businesswoman must be multifaceted. Very rarely are we seeing women at the top of their game solely focused on one particular career. Instead, we see that their hands are in many different parts, keeping them relevant in many different industries. Harmony is a perfect example of this. That's a really powerful statement. Yeah, but I'm thinking with what you're talking about right now, that experience, the start of the recession, and even though, as you say, you might have been naive, still, though, it launched all these other ideas for you, and you are very multifaceted in your business. I just wonder how you feel about that.
Oh, I think that's what keeps me going. I think if I did the same thing every day, one, I would be obsolete quicker than hopefully I will be. And two, I would be bored. I think that as creative people, like yourself, you start something new because you're inspired by it. And it doesn't mean you get rid of what you've always done.
Right.
But you find a way to marry the two together that support one another because it's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And I also am a very firm believer of, in this day and age, that you can't put all your eggs in one basket because the market changes so rapidly.
Diversification.
Absolutely. And so in 2011, when I started Fete, the destination wedding blog, destination weddings, when I first started, was a small portion of the market. And I saw more and more couples coming to us and saying, well, do you have any vendors that are, in Mexico? And so cut back to the beginning of the Bridal Bar, everyone was shopping hyper locally. If you were getting married in Beverly Hills, you wanted a Beverly Hills wedding photographer that had worked at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And it was hyper local. So to be approved and vetted and welcomed into the Bridal Bar, into our vendor membership, you had to be local. We turned thousands of companies away that were just not local. And then I saw the demand in the market shift where couples were saying destination. I didn't have anything to offer them because we had been so hyper local. And so we launched the Destination Wedding blog to sort of answer that. But then as that portion of the market grew even bigger and is still growing today, we've now expanded the Bridal Bar membership to be anywhere in the world because we're not even doing our couples a service if we're saying, oh, the only photographer you can work with is in LA, because they'll hire from anywhere.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the offshoots of my business that I have started have been because of market shifts and pivots and seeing where the demand is and seeing the need to answer that demand in order to keep our business relevant or successful. But out of that has given me a lot of, I would say, opportunity in different aspects and different areas that I wouldn't have thought. But it keeps my creative juices flowing. I love the destination market. And so Fete is an opportunity for me to put any content I want that's destination related on it. And that's what inspires me in my personal life is travel. And so it's like a fun thing I can do that keeps me happy at work. Because frankly, we're not always happy every day. So I do think that diversification is important to my soul personally. But then I look at, if for one day in the future, XYZ element goes away, the other element still exists. And so you can survive. You know, I'm not married. I'm not supported by anyone else. I've got to keep the roof over my own head, and I always have. And so I have to, I have to keep kind of 2 steps ahead to make sure that the bills are always going to be paid. And why not have that come from 5 different sources? That way, if one dips, the other can push forward.
Hey, listen, that phrase, multiple streams of income, is very
absolutely
important. Well, sticking with the finance part and the business part of this, I also read somewhere, I don't think it was that long ago, you said that you operate on a bootstring marketing budget. Do you still feel that way?
Oh, 100%. I am the cheapest person in the world when it comes to marketing.
Because this is a struggle so many of us face, right? It's like you need to spend money to get the marketing and the promotion, advertising to make money. And it's like a catch-22. I mean, how?
Well, I definitely believe in that because you have to spend money at the bridal bars. But, you know, here's what I always say. I speak every year at San Diego State University to the hospitality kids that are trying to start their own businesses. And one of the tenets that I always share is it always costs more than you think, but less than you have. And that has been my experience in every minute of my career and my business, in that if I want to do something that I don't have the marketing budget for, because, wow, this is expensive. And it's always sticker shock. It's always like, wow, this is going to cost that much. Right. There's always a way. And maybe that's not true in life, but it's been my experience at the bridal bar. There's always a way, and there's always a way to get creative. And I see so many businesses that throw money at the problem and then all of a sudden don't have any money left. But if you never had the money to begin with, it's amazing what you can get done when you get creative.
You figure it out.
Absolutely. And that's what I have always done, and it's always served me. I was actually at San Diego State about 2 weeks ago for that class, and I told them a story about, it's totally irrelevant to today's market, but back in the day, the Wedding Salon, which is a big bridal show, started in New York. They were coming to LA for the first year, and this is probably 10 years ago. They were coming to LA for the first year, and they were like, we're going to have 2,000 brides come in, and they had a big name from New York, and they said, we want the bridal bar to brand the gift bags. We're going to give away bridal bar gift bags to all 2,000 people. And I was like, wow, what an opportunity. And they're like, all you have to do is fill all kinds of free gifts and product in bridal bar branded gift bags for 2,000 people. I'm like, okay, well, that's $30,000 right there. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity. But I knew I couldn't afford it. And I knew I didn't want to afford it. I didn't want to put all my eggs in that basket. That would have eaten up I couldn't have marketed it anywhere else. And so instead, I ended up spending maybe like $200 or $300 on it. And
come on, the
only thing I spent any money on was printing like a pamphlet about the bridal bar from my local printer. Everything else, I hustled. I got creative because I didn't have it. And so I went to all of these different product companies and I said, you're going to get in front of 2,000 brides.
The exposure.
And Bridal Bar has a name. I'm going to give you the opportunity to co-brand your product with my logo.
Right. No, but it's true though.
And you can put my logo on your tote bag and I will brand you as the gold standard in the wedding industry. And I sold this to all these different companies. And I probably had, 24 companies.
You probably had to turn people over.
I had an enormous amount of success with other people paying to do the gift bag on my behalf.
Right.
And it doesn't have to look like that, obviously, but I always look at, okay, if there's a will, there's a way. And so if it surprising sticker shock what something's going to cost, but if you don't have it, that doesn't mean you can't do it.
But okay, so I'm going to go a little bit direction with this. When the money is starting to come in, I mean, you seem to have a very successful business, and yet you still, like you say, you're very cheap about it. I mean,
strategic. I guess I shouldn't have said
that's a better word. Yeah. Strategic. That's one of my...
Off the record, maybe a little cheap.
But that's one of my challenges is that when stuff is really doing well, I tend to be a little more free with the money, and then that bites me in the ass later.
Right, and then next year you're like, oh gosh, we're bootstrapping again.
It's so hard to... But you no matter what's going on, you keep that philosophy.
I do, and I think part of it is... going back to what I said earlier about had we discounted our services, once you realize you don't have to spend it, then you never want to spend it, right? And so if I succeeded for the first few years not spending it, why am I going to change it now and start spending it? Now, that doesn't mean that I won't invest in something that I think is incredibly valuable. I certainly do spend money and market my business. That's not to say that doesn't exist, but I still get creative. There's a good example, The Knot magazine. I love The Knot. They've been so good to me over the years, and they've obviously got a fantastic product. I could pay to advertise in The Knot. Instead, I created value for The Knot with my destination wedding blog, Fete. And now they actually pay me to put me in their magazine every month. And so not only am I getting paid, but I'm also getting the marketing platform that I could technically be paying them for. Now, what that looks like is unique to my business because I have built something else up over, the last 10 years or 8 years in terms of that site that provides them something that made them want to come to me with this opportunity. So it's not necessarily A plus B equals C at that moment, but you've got 8 years of track record on this, which can lead to an opportunity over here that eventually A plus B equals C. And so that's how. Now, if I wanted a different level of marketing in the Not National book, I would pay to advertise for it. And I think it's a great place to pay to advertise if that's where you're going to spend, if that's the medium that you're going to spend your money in.
Yeah.
It just depends, it looks different for everyone, but that's one example that I think that because of some of the things I've done behind the scenes, I've been able to create value where I don't have to spend that money.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I also want to ask about, I want to switch a little bit now to sticking with marketing, but like social media. So you had said not going to have a sustainable business just because you're Instagram famous. And what happens when the next best social media platform comes about? You need to see all the marketing platforms relevant to your business. And
where are you finding all these quotes? I'm so impressed.
Well, that is such a tough thing. Like, at the time of this interview, there's issues with Facebook and Instagram is it right now, but who knows, and I think about that. And I think, I've got a great strategy with this podcast business and, with Instagram and all of that, but who really knows where things are going next? How do you feel about that? And working with the social media platforms? So
I think they're a necessary evil. And I think that looks different for every company. The companies that I work with and represent, some of them, we go very deep and long into the social media strategy and campaign. And others, we just dip our toe in it to appear professional to the client. Sure. So I think it's really a very personal answer based on that business. But and this is not my quote. I don't remember who coined this, but I always remember this when people talk about putting all their eggs in the Instagram basket right now, is that you're renting that land. Ooh, that's a good way to put it. And so the landlord could kick you out at any time and you're homeless. Whereas your own website, your own podcast, your own newsletter, you own that land and you're staying as long as you choose to stay. And so what would you rather do? Invest in remodeling a kitchen in a home you rent or one that you own? And I wish I could remember who had said that to me the first time, but that's how I look at it. Is I think it's a necessary evil we have to participate in to stay relevant and looking professional to our clients. For some people, it's an invaluable tool right now, but I don't think we should ever put all of our eggs in one basket. And case in point, what's happening this week, Style Me Pretty, one of the largest wedding blogs in the world, announced last week that they were closing, and there's now this campaign to save Style Me Pretty, right. and it may be saved. It may not be, but I look at all of the vendors that invested so much time and money into that platform. Really, and they've got to be scared. Oh, and everybody's trying to save it because it's saving themselves too, because that's how they perceive it. Well, but there is value, there is truth to that. Now, obviously, a lot of it, so Style Me Pretty, perfect example, they created like vendor portfolios on it. A lot of people stopped updating their own website and started updating Style Me Pretty's vendor portfolio. So things like that. Now they're scrambling to get their own websites updated. There's all different layers to this, but all of their press mentions are on there. A lot of people really had tunnel vision on Style Me Pretty for so long that they didn't want to be in the Knot or Brides magazine, which I think are fantastic fantastic outlets. They only wanted to be on Style Me Pretty. Well, if Style Me Pretty's gone on April 30th or whatever the date is, they've got no press to show for it. They've got nothing. And so, but that could happen to a bridal magazine too. That certainly did in 2009. I was in dozens of magazines that now brides that are getting married have never even heard of, things like Elegant Bride and magazines that I loved back then.
Yeah. What is it? Modern Weddings? Anyway. Yeah. Modern Bride. Anyway. Yeah. But there's a lot of them. You're right.
And so I feel like you have to reinvest in yourself and whatever platforms those are at all times, and then farm it out everything else, like fingers on a hand, where your core is your palm, is everything that you own, and all of your fingers are sort of the rental properties. And so you're not putting 100% of your business investment into one place. And that's true simply because I think that there's no golden ticket. And so I have a lot more fingers than 5 fingers on my sort of marketing hand, because I think they're all valuable for different reasons in different ways at different times. But there isn't one. You can't say, I'm just going to put all my eggs in Style Me Pretty's basket and have that be your golden ticket and have it get you to, Willy Wonka. It's not feasible in the long term. It might be in the short term if you find instant Instagram success, but when Instagram does die and the next big thing comes out, you're SOL. And so I think having lots of different kind of fingers or balls in the air protects you to a degree from Style Me Pretty closing.
Since you bring that up, so Sean Lowe did a great blog about this. And, we know that Abby was I'm almost getting tired of this word. It's almost cliche, but, authentic. Mm-hmm. I mean, the way she handled it changed, when she was no longer there with AOL taking over.
Right.
And so in terms of being authentic, I felt like that was, in a sense, a buzzword last year, but I'm feeling like it's even more important now. Like we need to go even deeper in it to create that emotional connection. How do you feel about that?
I think that's absolutely true. I think that Instagram has now been around long enough, and now there's all these Instagram, workshops and online classes. I'm sure I see them in my feed as ads, join my Instagram, how to get famous overnight on Instagram kind of things. And I think now there's enough information out there of who has become successful and how, that now people can go ahead and try and replicate that. And they can take that Instagram success story model and replicate it to their own business. And so everyone's catching on to that. So now all of a sudden, no one looks authentic again because all of our Instagrams are fitting this model and this mold. I mean, frankly, myself included, I have a process to photos that it was not my original. I didn't even have a process to photos when I first started Instagram. And so I think that makes, it's sort of like the flat lays, the photos that you're taken from above of the Mrs. Box and the flower and the invitation and the Jimmy Choo shoe and all of that. Well, that was unique and authentic and different with the people that started that. And now it was successful. So now everyone does it. So now it's inauthentic and not unique, special, and different. And so because we've jumped on this model of this is what works, the next big thing is going to have to be this is what works for me, and it's not what works for everybody else, or I'm just like everybody else. And so I think that authenticity is really important. I don't think that's an easy thing to portray on the internet. And I think me not being a spring chicken anymore in this wedding industry and working with a lot of the veterans in our field, it's even harder for us because it doesn't come naturally. We can be very authentic people, you and I having a conversation, but we didn't grow up Snapchatting and selfieing. And so for us to feel authentic in doing this, right. But for us to go into that platform as individuals and be authentic in it feels so fake to a lot of us. And so and for me included, I find you'll almost never see a photo of me on my own feed. And if you do, it's because I've taken 250 of them and I cringe and I put my phone on airplane mode for the next 24 hours because I'm afraid to see what if I don't get enough likes and all of that stuff that I know a lot of people face. But it's how do you balance that idea that maybe putting yourself out there on social media isn't authentic to you, but you're trying to be authentic on social media.
This is so interesting. I can relate to this. I mean, I admit it. I just had such an aversion to social media when it all came out, Facebook, everything, all of that stuff. And I do have people in both of my businesses that are handling that. However, like Melissa Heigl, who's my marketing and social media director, had a good talk with me about a month ago that I have to do this. And she had great ideas for me, and I understand why. We had a really good talk about it. But what I decided to do, similar to my philosophy we've been talking about, is all right, let me embrace it then. And quickly, I started sending her just tons of stuff that for me was fully from the heart. It's got to be from the heart. I couldn't create, in a sense, even though I create things, I couldn't create that. And so I thought, I'm just going to put myself out there. And she's telling me that is what people are responding to.
That's great.
But I'm saying that it took me a long time. I had to have my throat choked.
Right.
Because originally I thought doing all that is just a bunch of crap. It's inauthentic. So the more you just really put your real self out there, it works.
It does. I do think, though, the other side of that coin is that if it's just not who you are, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that and people will probably shudder at that thought, that don't compete on Instagram. But I do believe that it is so hard to compete on Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
That if it goes against every, molecule of who you are, and you don't have a team or the people in place that feel differently, then you're never really going to succeed at it. So I think it is important to have a presence that looks professional, that shows that you're still in business and things like that, and that you are participating. But that's one example of a client that I wouldn't put as much emphasis, time, or money in that avenue, because they're never going to compete in trying. They're not going to win. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I go back to my competitive nature. So I create games that I can win. I
like that.
I don't. And that's what I did with creating my company and Bridal Bar. It was different, and I could win because I wasn't competing with anyone, essentially. And if I do have to compete, I'm not getting in a race that I know I'm going to lose. And so that's sort of how I feel about if Instagram really just is against your being and your core, that's okay. There are other ways to win and other games to play in that you can win at.
But I'll say for myself, though, I found the way to have fun with it. That's what did it for me. I mean, yeah, that's not necessarily my first choice doing that kind of thing, but I found a way to enjoy it and have fun with it.
And people will feel that, and it sounds like they are.
Yeah, I think so. As we get closer to wrapping up, I also want to ask, God, Harmony, you've given so much wonderful information that people can use. If you were giving a masterclass to a room full of really fairly experienced people, but who want to get to that next level, in today's day and age, if you need to pick just one or two or three biggest tips, advice, what would you say in that class?
First and foremost, I would probably say it is who you know. And
so networking. And when I say it is who you know, I don't necessarily mean, okay, Andy, you and I know each other. We're solid. We're going to do something together. It could be somebody you don't know, but you're going to get to. I speak a lot about this idea of kind of the power of two. And I believe very much so that two heads are better than one and three heads are better than two. And the same goes with brands. Okay.
So if I want to get something out there by partnering with someone else that maybe I don't know, and maybe I solicit for this idea, or maybe it is who I previously know that I can work together on this, that teaming up with people you quote know, whether you know them now or later,
right, is
going to get you there that much quicker. You're going to double your audience size potentially if that's the structure of the relationship. You're going to have two sets of expertise that could really complement each other, especially for small businesses, because a lot of us don't have that business partner to kind of bounce that off of. So, and that could be licensing deals, that could be strategic partnerships, that could just be teams of people that work on a project or an event together. It doesn't have to be some big legal contract and some legal partnership, but I very much believe in that. It's who you know and that power of two that will traject you further quicker.
Now I fully get that. I love that. But at the same time, what about the issue of having to give up some control?
Well, it has to be the right partnership or alignment, obviously. Mindy Weiss has this great story that I heard her give at a talk at a conference once. And she bought a grocery store.
I don't know this.
And well, I won't tell the whole story. I'll let her tell you one time when she comes on.
Actually, I interviewed her. It's going to be released in a little while, but I didn't hear that story.
Awesome.
I didn't hear that one.
Her local market was failing. And she bought it because she had an emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
And she thought putting her name on it would save it. And ultimately that wasn't what happened because it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And she did it for a lot of personal reasons, which are great. But strategically it didn't work because strategically it wasn't the right team. And I think that a lot of that goes to who your partner is and giving up control. But in a lot of ways, you also don't have to give up that much control. I have partnerships that, like I have a license deal with Appy Couple, who makes wedding websites and apps for couples to get that information about their wedding out to their guests. And we have a collection of Bridal Bar websites through Appy Couple and a royalty program in place. And the founder of Appy Couple and I work really well together. So we've never had that power struggle of giving up control, but we also do two completely different things in the partnership. I am not a graphic designer, so I am not taking away her graphic design control because I couldn't if you gave me a pen and paper, I wouldn't know what to do with it. In that sense, though, she's got that market cornered, but she's taking my direction. But because we work really well as a team, she's able to bring my market expertise and my ideas from brides to life in a graphic design setting that I couldn't begin to dictate to her. And so it's this really great win-win symbiotic relationship that doesn't require either one of us giving up any control.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Were you about to give another one too? You were about to say something else?
Another, if my 2 or 3 master, I would definitely say what I spoke about earlier about kind of it costs more than you expect, but less than you have. And lastly, I would probably say that reinvention and that hustle and that bootstrap ability is, at least for me and for so many of my clients. I mean, my very first Bridal Bar client is someone that I still work with to this day, 14 years later. And so if you can imagine, and that's a wedding photographer, his business has seen lots of cycles and highs in the market and lows in the market and triumphs and successes and even personal relocations and things like that get involved and children and all of these things that affect our businesses. And I think that where I have succeeded and a lot of my clients like that is they don't quit and you do see the change ahead of you and you embrace it instead of digging your heels in. Or instead of shying away from it. I think you were saying if the masterclass was to people that are
with experience.
And I think it's hard to let go of what's worked because it's worked. And to see the next turn that you need to make. And when we're so married to our businesses and we're so tunnel vision and focused that we do have to take a step back and say, so Bridal Bar for 11 years was storefront driven. And while we still have offices in San Diego and Los Angeles, it's not storefront driven anymore because that's not how people shop anymore. That's not what the audience wants from us. And that was a hard thing for me personally to come to the realization of, because that was how I started.
Yeah.
But that's not how I'm going to finish. And had I forced myself to finish that, I probably would have lost.
Right. I want to add to this too. I like to think of it as, I don't want to wait till there's a problem before I have to reinvent myself. I like to do it before there's a problem.
Absolutely.
And I mean, some of it is just for myself. I just want to keep myself interested and inspired, right?
It's that creative, we have this bug to keep going.
Yeah. But if I could do it before there's some kind of a problem showing, I think it's wonderful that way.
Well, and I think a lot of that goes to, reading and keeping up with. So Sean Lowe, again, he told me, I forget how many, but years ago, he said, you should be reading this many hours a day, or I think it was like 2 or 3 hours a day and just reading. And I thought, yeah, sure, Sean. Okay. And I never got to the level that he wanted me to read every day, but I do spend an enormous amount of time not necessarily reading Facebook, but sometimes reading Facebook groups to see what other industries are doing or other people in the market are doing. Reading a lot on Inc.com and things like that. And so a lot of those changes or pivots, I'm able to kind of start to go, you know what? I've noticed this in my business too. And this person's seeing that and that person's seeing that, and listening to what's out there so that you can see the change come before it's hit you. And that has helped me tremendously. And I would say that that's certainly something for veteran entrepreneurs to keep up with, is that you have to see beyond your own walls in order to see what change is going to come, to get into it before it happens.
Yeah, no, I like that. You know, I also will read a lot of biographies, look at documentaries, and even though some of them might be dated, I'm still getting these inspirations to apply something, not directly, but it just inspires something in my own business, you know? So Harmony, what is the best way for people to find out more about you and to reach you?
So it depends. Brides and grooms can go to bridalbar.com to learn a little bit more about the consumer side of the business. A little bit more of the marketing and business development side you can learn about at harmonywalton.com. Of course, you can follow me on social at Bridal Bar, kind of across all platforms.
Okay.
And you can listen to Bridal Bar Radio on iHeart Radio.
Sundays, right?
Sundays is when it goes live, but it's on demand anytime on iHeart Radio, the website, or on the app, which is sort of comparable to a Pandora app.
Yeah, and I would urge everybody to check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to have it all in our show notes too, so everyone can go there to get that. I mean, Harmony, this has been a blast. I really, really appreciate it. You've given, so much valuable information. I thank you for it.
Thank you for having me. You were coming on Bridal Bar Radio next. We got to schedule that before I leave today.
Oh, all right. That's a deal. Cool. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Harmony Walton. So inspiring. And if you enjoyed it, please give a review wherever you get your podcast. That would help us a great deal. And be sure to share it with friends and colleagues so that we can continue to elevate our industry. And listen to the follow-up episode, The Next Level, in which my co-host and I break down what are the top tips of the episode so that you could help bring your business to the next level. Thank you for listening.